right, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Great to have you in the conversation today. Let's grab soundbite 1 and 2, Rob. This is from The Morning Joe. And this is a follow-up on the conversation that we began yesterday about women in combat. Not just women in the military, but women in frontline combat positions, which is just about as horrible an idea as you can imagine if you care about women. If you believe in the inherent dignity, worth, value, femininity, and beauty of women, the last thing that you would want to do to them is to put them in infantry frontline combat positions. And part of it is as we talked yesterday, there are these profound differences in physical makeup, and this is God's design. God designed men with superior upper body strength, with bigger size, with more stamina, because it's God's design for us as men to use our strength to protect the women and children in our world. It's upside down to have a culture where we depend on the women to protect the men from harm. That's not the way God has designed culture to work. He's designed a woman's body for different purposes, obviously equipped her, designed her in skeletal structure and child conceiving and bearing and nursing capacity for a different role in society. Women just do not have the upper body strength. They don't have the skeletal structure. They don't have the muscular structure. They don't have the muscular capacity. A woman can lift weights for the rest of her life, and there is a ceiling in terms of how strong she can get. They're just not designed for the rigors of combat. And, you know, part of what you see is this hysterical reaction on the left when conservatives bring these kind of common sense factors into the discussion. They just completely freak out. And this morning on the Morning Joe, we got a couple of sound bites from the Morning Joe where they had a pretty vigorous exchange over this whole issue. And, you know, they're arguing, people who want women in combat are arguing on the grounds of equality. And my point is no, what you're arguing for is inequality. You're not arguing for equality. You're arguing for inequality because you have to drop the physical standards in order to get women to be eligible to be in combat. I mean, you have to carry packs. You have to be prepared to carry that weight. You've got to be prepared to carry that for miles. You have to be prepared to carry that over rugged terrain. You have to be prepared to live a very primitive existence for days, weeks, sometimes even months on end. And the bodies of women simply were not designed for that. I got an email here from a former Marine by the name of Dave. He says, look, I am a disabled Marine veteran. By the way, you can contact us, focalpoint@afr.net, focalpoint@afr.net. He said, I am a disabled Marine veteran. I was injured in Iraq. Putting women on the front lines is the most ridiculous thing I've heard of. I was pulled out of a burning vehicle, and I am afraid that if there was a woman who had to pull out my 200-pound plus frame out of the vehicle, I wouldn't be here today. It's a bad move for our military all around. And that's a key part that the politically correct folks just simply do not talk about. The purpose of the military is to fight wars. It's to break things and kill people so we can sleep safely in our beds at night. Soldiers get wounded. You need soldiers that have the strength to pull, extract, and carry a wounded comrade to safety. Women simply are not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to sling a 180, 200-pound guy over their shoulder and carry him to safety. They'll crumple under the weight. And again, that's, if you're going to blame anybody for that, blame God. And then blame those that are willfully ignorant of the clear differences in design between the way God has designed, made, created man and woman. They're not duplicates. They are not interchangeable parts. They each have an irreplaceable, unique function in society. And we've got to get back to common sense and just recognizing that because of the risk to which we're putting not only our female soldiers by putting them in these combat positions, but we're also placing the lives of their male comrades at risk. So listen to a couple of these excerpts from the Morning Joe as they discuss this whole idea of women in combat. This is from this morning. Let's listen.
There's a reason why there are no women in the NFL. There's a reason why there are no women in Major League Baseball. There's a reason why there are no women in, most male-centered professional sports. There is a difference physically between men and women. Is that, can we still say that in 2013?
Yes. Yeah, but you cannot assume that every man is ready and capable. You may be.
I don't assume that. I only want men that can meet the standards. I think this is very important, Richard, because I hope the Pentagon thinks through this in a way that doesn't put American lives at risk, because the one thing that keeps men in combat right now fighting, as I've heard my entire life from veterans who have been there, it's not the flag. It's not the great idea of American democracy. It's your buddy next to you, and they leave no man, and if women are in combat, they will leave no woman behind. And the question is, will that in any way jeopardize the safety of men and women that are going to be fighting now in the future?
Yeah, Joe, I just think we've moved beyond that, right? These physical tests.
I hope not, Richard. We're talking about people's safety. Move beyond what?
That's a great question. He said we've moved beyond all of that. We've moved beyond all that nonsense about how men and women are different. We've moved beyond all that nonsense about how men ought to care for and protect the women in our world. We're way past that. We're now to the point where we want to throw women out there into combat with no thought for their safety, no thought for their protection, no thought for the kind of harm that we're exposing them to. We're way beyond all those outdated notions of chivalry, of men using their strength to protect women the other way around. Here is clip number 2.
There is a difference. There is a difference physically, for the most part, in what men are able to accomplish and what women are able to accomplish out on a battlefield, on a football field, around a track. It's, again, this is not shocking. This is not open.
Well, just going back to your point.
And by the way, I just want to be very clear, because I'm sure people are freaking out right now. I'm not saying I don't want women in combat. Women can be in combat, but I'll be... I mean, if we find out correct reasons, then you know what? Then the blood of the dead Americans in future battles will be on their hands. That's what we've got to make sure doesn't happen.
So Joe Scarborough kind of sounded like a conservative there, actually, and kind of on our team on this issue. And his point is, look, you don't want to dumb down the standards, the physical standards, and women simply cannot meet the standards that are required to serve in these combat positions. And there's one other thing. I don't want to spend much time on this, but this directive from the Department of Defense is flatly unconstitutional, because the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, does not say that the commander-in-chief sets the rules for the military. The rules for the military are set by Congress. That's one of the powers of action that is reserved for Congress. So this isn't a rule unless Congress says it's a rule, and I don't think they could get this through Congress for the reasons we're talking about here. So this is flatly and egregiously unconstitutional. It's got no constitutional authority whatsoever. But here, I want to read just a little bit about some of what's involved in combat. Here's a piece in the Wall Street Journal by Ryan Smith, written by Ryan Smith. It was in yesterday's Journal. He served as a Marine infantryman in Iraq, like Dave, from whom I got the email. And he says, look, what they're missing here is what he calls the absolutely dreadful conditions under which grunts live during war. Now, this is going to be fairly graphic stuff, but I think it's important that you understand what we are talking about if we expose women to combat. He talked about the 2003 invasion of Iraq as a Marine infantry squad leader. We rode into war crammed in the back of amphibious assault vehicles. They are designed to hold roughly 15 Marines snugly. Due to maintenance issues, by the end of the invasion, we had as many as 25 men stuffed into the back. Marines were forced to sit in full gear on each other's laps and in contorted positions for hours on end. That was the least of our problems. The column was a blitzkrieg, meaning the column would not stop for a lance corporal, a sergeant, a lieutenant, or even a company commander to go to the restroom. Sometimes we spent over 48 hours on the move without exiting the vehicles. We were forced to urinate in empty water bottles inches from our comrades. Many Marines developed dysentery from the complete lack of sanitary conditions. When an uncontrollable urge hit a Marine, he would be forced to stand as best he could, hold an MRE bag up to, the proper place on his anatomy and do whatever you need to do inches from his seated comrade's face. Now, do you want your daughter in a situation like that? Do you want your wife in a situation like that? Due to the heat and sweat, layers of our skin would peel off our feet. However, we rarely had time to remove our suits or perform even the most basic hygiene. We quickly developed sores on our bodies. When we did reach Baghdad, we were in shambles. We had not showered in well over a month, and our chemical protective suits were covered in a mixture of filth and dried blood. We were told to strip and place our suits in pits to be burned immediately. My unit stood there in a walled-in compound in Baghdad, naked, sores dotted all over our bodies, feet peeling, watching our suits burn. Later, they lined us up naked and washed us off with pressure washers. And he adds this: one can only imagine the humiliation for a woman of being forced to relieve yourself in front of the opposite sex. Well, humiliation for males as well. Women in combat, a bad, bad idea. It defies chivalry. It defies God's created order. Focal Point AFR Talk will be back after the news. Stay with us.